This is Live Through My Lens. I'm your host, Nicholas Smith. This evening, I would like to introduce you to an extraordinary woman. Her name is Anyanwu. Anyanwu has been shot 4 times, one of the bullets currently lodged in her left shoulder. Not only did she live to tell the story, she also created an award-winning business from her experience. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Anyanwu Live Through Her Lens.
I run a company called The Human Root. And what we do is we go into community spaces and we figure out what's going on with the culture of your environment and where are the challenges based on bias.
Yeah.
And so that's the way I would really say it as an entrepreneur or as someone that is looking for a client. But to be really direct, it's about creating a human experience where people are able to connect with each other, where people are able to feel and understand their differences and evolve. And so we go into mostly K through 12 schools. We work with mostly young people and educators, and we ask them, how does bias show up in your school? How is it affecting your policies, your curriculums, the growth, the transformation? And we provide curriculum to get people to move forward and engage with a high level of empathy and an intention for action to create change.
Creating change. When you speak of creating change, what does creating change look like to you?
For me personally, creating change means healing. In the work that I do, in the work that the Human Root does, creating change is really just about the human emotion and the ability to feel and see one another. So if I'm in a circumstance with you, if I can actually see you fully as a human being, the way I'll communicate with you is different. If I can get people to do that, I know that no matter what's happening in a space, that change is going to exist. Transformation will happen.
You emphasize this being seen. Do you think there's a point in life where maybe you felt like no one saw you?
You coming for me early. Absolutely. I think, to be honest with you, in this last 6 months is the first time I've actually been able to apply my life's journey and figure out what does it mean to own being seen. And it's just a trip because I've spent most of my career supporting people to be seen. And what I mean by that is that your full representation and your full self, your whole being can show up unapologetically and you're able to stand in your power regardless of what's around you and the expectation for others to do that for you as well.
I mean, standing in your power really takes a lot. It takes making sure understanding who you are as a person and what that power even is.
Yeah.
So when did you discover, or what does the power look like to you in being in yourself, in being young? What does that look like to you?
I think I had to understand, I had to do the internal look and the search to understand how it felt to not be in my power. I think I experienced a lot of things where I was not in my power. And from that, to be able to heal, I had to figure out how to get to the other side. And so that meant a lot of things for me. How do I engage with people? How do I let people treat me? The boundaries that I create. Am I able to notice the way that people behave with me and how it impacts my own personal experience? And that's hard because you have to be direct. You have to understand how you may be passive aggressive and change that. I think standing in my power means that I know that I can use my voice through behavior and through showing up with the things that I actually say.
Basically, saying what you mean and mean what you say. And actually, not even saying it, but also living it. You know,
it's funny that you say that. Yo, let me tell you something. I used to tell people all the time. In fact, in my intimate relationships, in my adulthood, I always tell the person that I'm involved with, I say what I mean and I mean what I say. Literally that same phrase that you just said.
Wow. And it's a lot to say it, but you also have to live it. I mean, because part of your business is being able to facilitate change in the world, basically, is being able to live those changes and live that life the way, you're telling someone else they should, basically. So do you find it sometimes that it may be a struggle between actually living what you preach?
I think the integrity part's not a struggle. I seek to be honest. I seek to sustain connection because that's how I live. That's how I breathe. That's how I know who and where I am.
Yeah.
The part that's really difficult is the shame part. I think that the way that we live in our societies, whether we're conditioned in our home, our families, our education system or our religion. I think those are the main sectors that really raise us as human beings. And most of those places use power and shame exchangeably to be able to get control or to make things happen. And so I think we internalize that. And so the biggest part for me, the most difficult part, is to check the narrative of shame in my head so that I can show up as my full self, or I start to isolate or not even communicate. It's so many layers to it, but that shame piece as human beings is huge. I think it's unnatural, and I think that it's like a disease in our system almost.
Doing the work that you do, you have to make sure that you are 100% yourself, 100% standing in your truth, basically, to go out there and tell someone about their truth and actually peel back the layers and get them to see things that they may have even thought of before.
Right.
But you have to also I think it's being able to say, I am solid. And now I can actually look at you and say, you know what? Maybe we should look at things this way instead of that way.
Yeah.
And do you find that in a lot of work that you do, there's some resistance to that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm asking people to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I'm asking people to be transparent, And the level of bravery that you need to be vulnerable is it's serious business, because you're putting your being on the line. And especially with that shame thing I'm talking about, you have to try to put yourself out there and say that no matter how I show up, or no matter what kind of shame other people have for me or towards me, I'm still going to be me. And for me to ask that of people, I think is really challenging. And I think that's what makes the human root unique compared to some of the other folks in our communities that do this work. Yeah, in this industry.
Because what are some of the places you work? That you actually go and do this work? Where are some of the communities?
For the most part, in education spaces. So elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, nonprofit agencies. I think I focus towards young people because before starting my company, I spent many years in youth development and in schools. And so it just naturally made sense for me to go in that direction. I'm also in adult spaces that go into schools. Some universities have reached out. I really want to keep it intimate. And so I kind of work with the universe a little bit, and I try to pay attention to who's reaching out to me, what kind of alignment is happening, because I really feel like the work is bigger than me and bigger than the company. So I have to align with other energy as well. So clientele, I think over time is going to change because of some of the other things that I'm really passionate about. But for right now, schools are my focus.
I mean, I would think schools is where you can probably go and make the most impact, because there's young minds there that are more fertile.
Yes.
You can go and you can actually say something that they may be more open-minded and receptive of whatever you're teaching, in a sense. And it's definitely definitely a platform where you want to be get in early stages, so you can plant that seed early on, so it grows. And it's like I think working with school versus working with maybe
like a corporation
may be a bit harder, because people already kind of the way of thinking has already been hardwired through growing up.
Yes, I think so. Ironically, I've spent most of my career working with young people. Right now, most of my clients are adults that work with young people. I veered that way because I was like, if I can impact a school with, say, I have 100 young people in a space at a time, what does it mean to have impact with their teachers? And if every teacher has 100 students and I have 70 teachers in a room, you understand what I mean?
How does that teacher impact the students that they're teaching?
Exponential impact.
Yeah,
exactly.
So it's kind of like a ripple effect.
Yes.
It kind of passes on.
So I say that to say that, like, with adults, I think that is my goal. How do I interrupt what adults have internalized and how they've programmed themselves? Because I think that we all deserve to heal and transform. And so my new goal is to really incorporate adults in the same type of work I've been doing for the last 20 years with young people.
That's, I mean, funny you said that, because as adults, I think we kind of shape the idea and thinking of the younger, you know, people that are younger than ourselves.
Absolutely.
So I think the impact is real, you know. So I think doing that work yourself is important. So when you actually interact with, you know, the younger folks, you were able to kind of maybe change things a bit.
Yeah,
it's
what?
It may not be. It may be the smallest of things that may make the biggest of impact in someone's life.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that I learned that in my own journey, that when I look back on things, I sometimes know that people have no idea the level of impact that they've made on me. Like, people might be like, "Oh, I only knew her for 3 years," but that one day in that 3 years, or that 1 week, or that thing that we did together made an impact for the rest of my life. And I don't think anyone else is any different than me. I think that the one thing that's missing is we don't talk about it.
We don't talk. Where did you grow up?
Man, that's such a loaded question. I'm an 82 baby. I'm 36, and I would say that when you ask me how, like, where did I grow up? It just feels so layered because I moved around so much. Like my place where I've laid my head and say, "Oh, I'm going home tonight." If I count, I know that it exceeds 30.
Wow, that's a lot of places.
Yeah, I think, and I do it because it's important as a public speaker, as a motivational speaker, as someone in youth development and education. My narrative is really important, so that's why I keep abreast of like where and when and timeline, because I share that narrative to support people to feel more vulnerable as well. I share my own vulnerability. And so I know it's probably like 35, 36 times that I've shifted to another place. That's the place that I would have to call home for that moment.
Why was that?
It's a combination of things. It's a combination of opportunity, change, being firstborn American in my family, trauma, poverty, moments of poverty in my life. A lot of things have just moved me around. So when I say where did I grow up, I think of 3 different places. I think of Kingston, Jamaica as a young person, because as a child in my formative years, being with my family in Jamaica really set the tone for my beliefs, my principles, my values, even how I eat, how I engage with people, what I expect from people, even my radical self and how I show up and unapologetically talk.
Yeah.
And then my mom was in the military and we moved overseas. And then after that, we were in California, and there's a neighborhood that I lived in that transformed my life. Marin City, we call it the jungle. And growing up in that neighborhood.
Marin City is in the Bronx?
No, I was born in the Bronx, and then I grew up older years after, like, say, middle school, later elementary school, in California, Northern California, in the Bay. What's up, Bay Area? I grew up in the Bay Area, and living in Marin City was the place that really gave me an understanding that I had value on a whole nother level. So if I really represent for a place that I call home, I'm always going to represent for the Bay. I'm always going to represent for the jungle. In Marin City, California, and the Bronx and Jamaica is what prepared my vessel for the rest of for my rest of my life, for my world. But the people in that neighborhood held me, so I show up for them for sure.
When you spoke to our producer, you told him you even lived in Germany at one point. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, that was the first time that I had the opportunity to really be with my mother. I was probably 5 years old, a little bit after 5, and between the ages of birth to 5, I had moved from the Bronx to Jamaica to Brockport, New York. I think maybe back to Jamaica for a while, back to the Bronx again. And then when I was 5 years old, my mom entered the United States military, the Army, and she got stationed in Darmstadt, Germany. And so that was the time where I had a moment of calm. I wasn't moving around as much. So I lived in Germany.
To your life.
Stability.
After moving everywhere from Jamaica to Marin City and then moving to Germany, that was where you find some stability in your life after a long period.
Well, actually, when I was 5, I moved to Germany and I lived there for about 3.5 years. Then after living there for 3.5 years, my mother was stationed in San Francisco. And we landed in San Francisco, lived there for some time, and then we lived to Marin City. So when I was in Germany, I think that was probably the first time I understood what race really was. I think before that, I didn't know anything else other than Jamaican. Like I didn't really relate to what it meant to be American. I didn't really relate what it meant to even live in America. I just understood like a West Indian culture. And then, I got to Germany, and my mom happened to not get stationed. She happened to not get housing on the military base. So we got housing off the base. And so I was the only Black person, my mother and I, for like miles.
Wow.
Like I remember I was 5 years old at a Christmas party, 6 or 7 actually, at a Christmas party. And a little boy licked my face because he thought I would taste like chocolate. Like, that's how much. I promise you, I kid you not. And that's the first time I really realized that there was something about my skin color that was different.
Makes a difference.
And that shifted some things, I guess.
What was that experience like, being the only Black person for miles in Germany?
Yeah. I think by then I had already experienced, I don't know if I don't think I cognitively processed it, just where I was in my development as a child, but I knew what it meant to not belong by then, because I had moved around so much, and I was like a visitor.
Gotcha.
I was invited, but not necessarily welcomed. I had to shift and move a lot. And at that time, it was good to be in a home for 3 straight years without having to move. But being the only Black person in my day-to-day definitely had an impact. People either loved me or hated me for being German, as far as the German culture is concerned. Fascinated with me or want to like not be too close,
Oh, so it's kind of didn't know if you want to mix with you or not. So,
there was no real gray area.
Gotcha. From Germany, where'd you live after that?
We got stationed in San Francisco, which is a trip. It comes full circle. When we were stationed in San Francisco, we lived on a place called Presidio Army Base. It's not a base anymore. And then I started to feel like what a kid felt like. I believe there was a way that I wasn't in my body. I think I was really living an experience as a child that I was not in my body. I can explain that more as we talk later. But when I was in San Francisco, I was able to like have a bike and go hang out with friends and just be out and play. Before that, I don't even remember playing outside ever. Maybe in the Bronx, in the driveway. Being in the Bronx was a good time for me too. But it was just touch and go around feeling like I had a child's experience, and or versus being isolated and not.
Did you feel that Marine City was the home when you came back from Germany? If you were back in the U.S., you were back on where you felt most comfortable?
I don't know if I've ever felt most comfortable actually in my journey ever.
Wow.
I've never experienced that before. I've never, other than being in the town of Marin City, I've never had an experience of feeling like, oh, I'm at my home, probably until this last 6 months. It's taken that long to build that experience for me. I've always felt like a visitor everywhere else I've been. My sense of home was my work. Being an activist in community was my home. That's the place I could breathe. Being around young people was the way I could breathe, because they are who they are and they don't perform anything until later in adolescence, where they're trying to figure out how to fit in and be accepted so that they can actually get the job, excel, blah, blah, blah. But up until about the age of like 17, most young people are like, yo, this is me.
Yeah.
And so in my
living free, carefree.
and expecting you to respect that. And I think that's where I found my home. And so I found that at a really young age. And Marin City, I would say Marin City was the place. I was probably 12 or 13 years old. Marin City was the place that I was able to practice the work that I do. So I started at 14 years old. They put me in this work. Before that, I had lived in San Francisco, and it's a trip. I've always kind of, to become an entrepreneur at the other end of this stage in my career. I was a hustler even back then. This woman.
You have to start somewhere as an entrepreneur, but we'll get into the entrepreneurial journey. Take a quick break. I'll be right back.
Brooklyn Commons has been like tremendous for my business. It allowed me to be able to have a space for me to be able to do my creative work.
We've got architects here, we've got notaries, tax people. If you need an answer to a question, you really don't have to leave Brooklyn Commons.
It's really nice to come and be part of a community and make friends, even though I don't share space with my coworkers.
We loved how open it was. My team was really receptive to the colors and how bright it is.
Also space all over tables, chairs, couches, and things of that sort. So if someone does want to work more reclined, or someone wants to work outside, or someone wants to work at a larger table, we have the space to do that really easily without having to leave the building at all.
I use Brooklyn Commons because it is a wonderful creative environment.
We love working here. I've got a small, tight-knit team of 10 people. What we love most about it is that everything is provided, from the coffee in the morning to the photocopy services. It's perfect for a small organization.
Right before the break, you mentioned you had to hustle.
Mhm.
What did hustle look like to you?
There's a couple forms of hustle. There's the block hustle. The block hustle, I think, is I was the young person in the community that was like I was on the basketball team. I was active in school. I did after school programs. I think, but being in an environment where people were hustling, it really taught me something. I think I knew what that meant at an early age before then, but I was then able to apply it and see what it meant to really flip your dollar. And so when I was in Marin City, I started to understand that if I was able to have an idea, create a vision, and make an outcome from that, that there was something I could produce that will bring me some form of a gain. That's the system. That's hustle, right? And every time it brings you a gain, you take that gain and you go back to square one and you envision something else, you put it in action, and then you develop a gain out of that. So that was the hustle for me. It's like, how do I create that cycle?
Where was this hustle? This was with San Francisco, right?
The first one did start in San Francisco. I was 9 years old. My mom was in the military, and she didn't drink or anything like that, but her coworkers did. And my mom would help me on the weekends. I would ask her to drive me around to her coworker's house, and and we would also do it too. And they would collect their cans and their bottles. And so I would have like my schedule for the weekend in the morning. And I think I was probably in the 5th grade. And I would ask her to take me to XYZ's house and then take me to XYZ's house within this set for amount of time. And every 2 weeks, I would do this and take all those bottles and cans and then bring them down to the local grocery store in the Fillmore at Safeway. And I would turn those cans and bottles in for money.
Oh, wow.
And they started to even know me. They would know when I'll come, because it's to them, they see this little kid, And I would make my little $30, my little $50 every couple of weeks. And I think that's really where it really, really first started. And then...
I mean, that's a good start. It teaches you the value of hard work and money.
Yeah.
I mean, because those it was like 10 cents, 5 cents per can of bottle. So they kind of add up on over time.
Yes, it did.
What did you do with that money? How did you use it to kind of,
I was a child that wanted to support my household at a young age. And so I would use that money for regular things, lunch money, to just do things. I felt like I didn't want my mom to worry too much. And so I would want to do my part. And that was my way of putting some money in my pocket so I wouldn't have to ask her for anything. So it just went to the regular old stuff that kids want to spend money on.
Is that part of maybe growing up having very little? Or
I think it's part of not having a home or not feeling like you have a home and feeling like you're a guest and a visitor.
So you're always trying to create a home everywhere you go to a degree.
Yeah, and not be a burden. Like, I think that I learned at a young age, you need to figure out how to not be a burden for the people that are around you. And that's really why I started to be that way. I paid undergrad off by myself. I had like 4 jobs and a couple of extra hustles on the side. And
you're a Caribbean woman.
Yeah.
6 jobs.
So I got out of college at 25 years old from undergrad. I majored in Pan-African Studies. And what I did at that time was I decided, you know what, you decide to rest because this has been really, 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 really hard. As a young person, while I was really active in community, I was also depressed and no one really knew. there was self-harm involved during that time of my life. And so when I got to 25 years old and had made it that far independently, as far as taking care of myself as an adult, I went to Brazil. I went to Bahia. And when I got there, I stayed there for a long period of time, probably like 6 or 7 months or something like that. I saved up some money. I knew I was going to graduate college, and I had an opportunity to go there. And I took up on that opportunity and stayed there. And I wrote and I read books about Assata Shakur, and I learned about, I just went deeper into my craft as a Pan-Africanist, and was in the best place, one of the best places in the world that you could do that. And that was the first time. And then I did it again this year. I think it's after being at a tipping point and realizing that you worked really hard. And then this year I went to Ghana. And those 2 trips is what really gave me some time to breathe.
And center yourself. You mentioned being a community activist. How were you involved in communities?
Well, first, activist is a really big word, and I think that it depends on who's using it and how. But for me, I had to look up that word for the first time this week. And I was like, oh, snap, I really am an activist. You know what I'm saying? What that meant for me is, what that means for me right now is that I go into places and spaces, and I allow myself to be vulnerable enough to take the risk and to be radical and to use my voice, regardless of what the backlash may be, what the resistance may be, so that something can transform. And that thing can transform towards progress and change. And I think that that's what activism is. And it could be in small steps, big steps, whatever it may be.
Yeah, because a lot of times, it makes sense. Because a lot of times I hear about, there's so many activists for women's rights, LGBT rights, Black rights. And a lot of times I think some people may do it for the publicity of it, of what it, or maybe of the ability to call themselves an activist. But I think being activists really have to be true to and believe in what you're actually working towards.
Yeah.
And actually being able to put in the work and actually be authentic about it.
Yeah.
And not for the fame or glorify or whatever it is. The self-feeding of the ego, basically, what it comes down to. So at one point you lived in San Francisco and you worked at a jazz club. That's about that experience.
The jazz club. That's why I mentioned earlier that it was ironic that I've come full circle. I mentioned the place that I used to drop off those cans and those bottles at like 9 and 10 years old. It's a neighborhood called the Fillmore. And at that age, 10 years old, imagine fast forward all the way to 30 years old, 20 years later. And 20 years later at that time, I was working youth development. I had been working at a local youth agency in the Mission of San Francisco with Black and brown youth, mostly Latinx and Black community. And the first thing that happened was I had been there for about 5 or 6 years. And the work that I do, I don't necessarily have one-offs where I meet a young person and I do some form of social work or case management. It really was, who are you and how do you need to develop? So I was knowing young people anything from 3 to 7 years long in their lives.
Taking that extra more personal, interpersonal step of caring and not just being another name on the docket list. To go through.
Like not after school programs, but not hating on those programs because we need them desperately. We need those to continue. But youth development, really supporting a young person to grow in their being. And the Fillmore of San Francisco, not just like it was important to me as a young person, this agency that I worked in 20 years later, I came back up to the Bay. I went to school in Los Angeles, came back up to the Bay, and I ended up working at a youth program, a youth agency, youth development agency, that the young Black students in the program mostly lived in the Fillmore. They all these Sunnydale projects in Hunters Point and in the Fillmore. And these 3 neighborhoods are very key to San Francisco as a Black neighborhoods. And the first thing that happened was like my first real loss of a young person. Working in youth development for that many years, knowing young people in urban areas for that many years, you have losses. So I had young people that were lost to gun violence on a regular basis. Wow. But this one young person in 2010, I think it was, or so, or 2011, he was someone that I knew for about 7 years or 6 years, and he was shot during a dice game in the neighborhood, and just folks hanging out, and then conflicts happen, and out of that conflict, someone taking it too far, and he lost his life. And it was just the first time that gun violence really landed on my body, and I had to feel it on the inside. I think that there was a way that violence is such a part of our society. I was desensitized, and it was always about holding someone. But that was the first time I needed to be held, with the loss of young people.
Because you felt that all the work you put into in this young soul, basically, was suddenly just
taken away
for no reason but just plain dice.
And I had experienced losing other young people through the high schools that I worked at throughout San Francisco. But this young person, to know him intimately, to talk to him about huge transitional moments in his life, growing as a young man, and to support him through that, and then to see him just be disappeared and taken like that, it really landed on my body. And, fast forward a year later, just 5 blocks down the street, I got shot too, And I think that was in that span of that year, it made me have to pull together all the things I've shared with you in my life and have an understanding, like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
What's really going on? And since then, I've really been, I've always been intentional, but it made me push in hard on focusing on that.
Interesting. We actually have a video of an incident that took place when you were shot. We take a look at that video, and then we talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
So, what happened moments before that gunfire erupted? Allie.
Well, it happened on Ellis and Pierce Streets early this morning, but you can see the street has been reopened. The scene pretty much cleaned up and cleared away. This is the only damage you can see left behind from this early morning shooting. A 30-year-old woman driving a white Toyota crashed into this parked car. You can see where some of the paint is scraped on the side. And she crashed in this car after she was shot, and her car completely flipped upside down. This is what it looked like early this morning. It happened around 4 o'clock on Ellis and Pierce Streets. A San Francisco police detective at the scene told me the woman said she was trying to park here on the street when she heard and felt bullets. She was hit 4 times, according to the detective. She's in stable condition and undergoing surgery this morning. Now, meanwhile, investigators spent the morning combing through the scene, marking shell casings and bullet holes. Investigators say there were 2 shooters involved. And based on where those shell casings were, it seems to indicate the shooters walked right up to the vehicle and opened fire.
Wow.
Yeah.
What does watching that report make you feel right now?
In this moment, I know so much more about my body because of what has happened to me.
Because you still have that bullet in your body.
I do have one of them in my body.
One of them in your body as this day.
Yes, yeah.
So that's traumatizing.
Yeah. I mean, I'm able to literally feel, I can still feel there are moments, just like watching that video, there are things that happened in that instance that my body relives it physically. Like even watching the video, the way that PTSD works is that your nervous system connects to certain memories and things in your brain. And when you view it, you feel it in your body. So I can physically feel it.
For those who don't understand what PTSD means, can you give them a little more brief insight?
Yeah. Well, we know, so there's trauma, right? Or let's even start in a smaller version. A crisis happens in your life, and that crisis is stressful.
In this situation, this crisis is being shot.
And this crisis is being shot. Right. And so the level of crisis that you experience will affect your body on different levels as well. And the more intense that crisis is, the more your memory system in your body programs it in. And when it programs it in, you can feel, experience, process different things through all of your senses.
And just a simple trigger as watching this video and kind of, in a sense, reliving the experience, a memory of what transpired that night is kind of a trigger to your body.
Oh, yeah. That's how PTSD works. And that's why sometimes this word triggered is such an exercised word in society right now. And I think that there's a difference between being stressed out or frustrated or even depressed. But triggered is particular because it's literally your body believing that your body, your brain, or your senses believing that you are at that last time of crisis again, but right now.
Wow.
So, for example, when I first initially was shot, there's a thing that I was feeling, like a stinging type feeling that I felt in my body that in that moment, watching that video, I can feel that stinging in my body again. Or if I get shocked at an extremely high level, some of my bullet wounds, those areas will burn as if the bullets are going through my body
all
right
over
now.
again. So, wow. Basically reliving the experience.
Correct.
If not super similar.
Actually more, because at that time, I didn't really feel much. I felt the stinging thing and I felt the warm blood, but I didn't feel, my body is more cognizant of what I was feeling at that time now than even in the moment.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And that's how trauma works. And so when we're talking about PTSD, that's what we mean.
I mean, you can turn on any news channel today and the news is bombarded with, Black men being shot here, people in general being shot in projects, wherever they may be. Just the other day, there was a shooting actually in Brooklyn, not too far from where we're actually shooting tonight.
Yeah.
So how does experiencing or seeing these news actually, does it have any effect on you as a trauma victim?
Yes. It's important for me not to run from it, but be aware of it and know when I want to pause. Running from it means it doesn't exist. I'm going to avoid it at all costs. Being able to pause is like, okay, that just happened and this is how I feel. And I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z. Go out into the world today. I'm going to get my rest. I need a bath. I need to take, I practice herbalism. So I need to take some herbs or whatever it may be. But this other piece of being able to move through it is really important. So, I mean, it's like we're only 1 degree separated from it. Yesterday, I called someone and they're like, man, I just got in the house and someone just got shot in front of my building. And this was yesterday.
That's where you live?
This is where they live. And I think they're in Bed-Stuy and then Bed-Stuy, New York and in Brooklyn. And then about 15 days ago or 25 days ago or something, I'm getting off the train down the street from my house and a child gets shot in the face. I mean, like...
Wow, you saw them got shot.
I get off the train, I walk to the end of the block, and it's like pop, 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 pop. Right then and there. My earliest experience of gun violence was 4 years old. My apartment got broken into in the Bronx at 4, and I wake up and these two men are like waving their guns in my apartment. I mean, like it's so intimate for us in this society. It's
too intimate.
Mind-blowing. It's too intimate. It's too intimate.
It should not be this way, this common, where you literally have to get off the train and you're experiencing gun violence. And that moment when you got off the train and you realized what was taking place, was that a trigger for you at any point? Yeah,
I mean, even more than I knew. The first thing I did is I walked directly into the local restaurant. And it was one of those chain restaurants that will have the TVs and everything up. And I love basketball. I used to ball back in the day. And so I started watching a basketball game. Now, mind you, I never go into this restaurant. I sat at that same seat for 3.5 hours and I did not move. Oh, wow. And until my partner gave me a call. I texted her knowing she was getting out of work or school or something like that. And I said, hey, I'm over here at XYZ spot. Guess what happened today? And when I send that to her, I look at the time, I'm like, wow, I've been sitting here for 3 hours. So it's like I got stuck, and that's another thing that happened with PTSD. You program some of your reactions. And that's a form of PTSD, kind of, where you are kind of, you're reliving your trauma to a sense. Correct.
To a degree, right?
And the stuck one, ironically, is not when I got shot at 30 years old. The stuck one, because when I got shot at 30 years old, I went into action because I knew if I didn't do something, I would die. I had to save my own life. And when I was 4, I got stuck. My aunt said, go downstairs, because rest of my family lived on the first floor of this building. Go downstairs and let your auntie know what happened. And I was probably like 4 years old, and I got down to the first floor, and I remember going under the stairwell and just standing there. I felt like the entire day. Who knows how much time it was, but I got stuck because I felt like if I reached out and I knocked on that door, that the terror that I just had would, like a boogeyman, just swoop me up and take me away. So I just stood there under the stairwell until my aunt came downstairs while the robbers were in the house still with her. Wow. And so there are moments when if I feel trauma or triggered, I'll get stuck. And then there are moments when I go into direct action. Usually I go into direct action. If I have the privilege of no one knowing what's going on, I'll always get stuck, pause, stay quiet. If other people are involved, I always go into direct action. I think that's just a part of the nurturer in me that's like, You can handle
powers,
this, take care of what's going on.
You're stronger than you think you are.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a lot to take in. We'll take a quick break and we continue this conversation with Anyanwu. So before we went to commercial break, we're discussing your struggle with PTSD in a society where we are kind of so prone to gun violence, especially in the Black community. And do you feel that the trauma may not be as severe as you being shot, but maybe someone in our community who experienced some kind of traumatic events in their house, maybe someone like you as a little kid having to hide under the stairs because there was a robbery taking place upstairs, and maybe so. You think as a community that maybe we kind of internalize some of these similar traumatic events,
Absolutely.
and then it shows up in our community in different ways that are not pleasant?
Yeah, I think what's important also for me to say, it's like it's in the fabric of our society. I think that the way that it's projected is as if everything negative that exists in our society shows up in the ways that we're able to visualize that they're happening, as if it's only Black people or only brown people or only poor people. And it's just not true. It's like everywhere and it's in everything. I literally have to sit down with a remote control beside me because every 3 to 15 minutes I will be exposed to something connected to gun violence if any type of media is on. And that's where we live at in this time right now. And also because of something that we call in the like academic intellectual world of like the scholarship of violence and like just researching what's going on, there's this thing called vertical violence. And the idea is that the way that society is set up, that all the way from the top of hierarchy in our society and through all the identities and the class systems and the cultures and the religion, that based on this paradigm of hierarchy and how things happen, we're all exposed to violence. And it starts with religion and war. And because of religion and war and not agreeing culturally, there's this way that we're fighting over some form of power that is an illusion. And because of that,
we're fighting each other.
We're fighting each other. And it shows up in so many different places. And so for the Black community in particular and gun violence, I want to also mention, I've also been held at gunpoint by police officers for absolutely no reason. You know, so my neighborhood is a training ground for the sheriff's department in my county.
What?
Like exposure to militant violence or the presence of a gun is in the fabric of our existence as a society. And I think that we're not even realizing that we're internalizing it as much as we do.
Not only are we internalize it, I think we also it becomes a norm.
Yes.
Which we are not even afraid of it.
Correct.
It happens every day, and it becomes part of just another day
in the neighborhood.
In the neighborhood.
You know, ironically saying another day in our neighborhood is at this point in 2019, as you know, it's in our schools. It's on the street where we live. It's on the news. It's in the cartoons. It's in the music. I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, we even have clothing that's made on the fabric designed as if a gun hole had went through it. You can go to an automobile store that sells things for cars, and you could get a gunshot sticker to put on the side of your car, like your car been shot up. You know what I'm saying? So it's really in the fabric of everything, and I think that, you know, to go back to your question.
And that desensitizes us, but sorry.
Yeah, it desensitizes us completely, which actually aligns with what you were asking as far as, do you think individuals are exposed and they're experiencing PTSD or they're experiencing trauma, and what does that look like? And I think a lot of us don't even notice. It took me so long to even notice how much I'm impacted by it every day. And it's changed even how I run my life and why I even had to start a business so I can control my time and control my time for healing. You know, that inspired some of why I became an entrepreneur, because for me to be able to create sacred time for me to heal and take care of myself. Because, for example, you know, when that boy got shot some weeks ago, that night, I felt like if I laid down in the bed, I kept going back to the moment that I was face down in the dirt after I got shot. So I wanted to sleep with it sitting up.
Literally, when you got shot in the car, and your car went I can understand how the car even ended up upside down. So,
Yeah.
so you were trying to park, and as you get shot, you try to drive off, and then you.
I was getting off of work.
Yeah.
Just a regular old day, and it was my last day working at this jazz club, Ethiopian jazz club in the neighborhood. And I got in my car and I heard pop, 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 pop. And as soon as I heard that, I assumed that it was down the block because there had been some other instances within that summer. And it was Halloween weekend. And I flinched. And when I flinched, as I went down, I put my hands down like this. I glanced to the left and I realized my whole window was shattered. Now, by then I had already been shot, but I didn't realize it. In fact, thank God I flinched and went down, because when I saw the car months later, there was a hole in the very center of the headrest. So had I not even flinched down, it would have got me in the back of the head.
Wow.
You know, and so at that moment, I wanted to pee. I was already on my way home, but I was about to turn my car, the steering wheel, to leave. And that's when I initially got shot. So when I realized what was going on after flinching, I'm already in drive. My car is already about to leave the parking space. And so what I do is I pull out. And when I pull out, I don't realize that when my right arm is hit. And I had radial nerve damage. I couldn't even brush my teeth, shower myself for a very long period of time, and because I couldn't use my right hand. And what happened is it went through a radial nerve, and that nerve got damaged instantly. And so my whole arm was paralyzed. So I was paralyzed on the right hand, my temporary paralyzed on my right side of my body for some time. And so my arm just dropped. And when my arm dropped, the steering wheel drops. And then that means the wheels turn. And when the wheels turn and my foot's on the gas, it drove up the side of another car and flipped over.
And that's when you find yourself face down or in your car?
No, the car flipped over. I instantly was going to get out. And then I was like, you need a cell phone. It's 3:00 in the morning. You just got off work at this restaurant. So I reach around, I feel for my cell phone, I find it, but I feel on the tip of my fingers that the battery popped out. And so I drop that and I crawl out of my window. When I crawl out of the window, I stand up. And as soon as I stand up, I'm like, these got me. They got me. I just kept on saying, these got me. And I just kept saying that over and over again. But I realized that my hands were like this and I couldn't move them. It's because I had gunshots all over my upper body. And so my arms were stuck like this. And then I got tired instantly when I stood up and I wanted to kneel back down. But I'm like, you're on a side residential street. Nobody's walking down the street right now. If you sit down, you're going to bleed out and die. And before I got out the car, I remember hearing something, feeling something. Do you want to die or you want to live? And I'm like, yo, I've been doing all this work in the world. I'm like at the best place spiritually. I've been really practicing some great habits in my life, the things I've been working for in my life. I was in graduate school at the time. I was at the University of San Francisco in a master's in education program focused on human rights. I'm doing all this community work. And I was like, I felt like I had purpose and I didn't want to die. And I remember thinking that. And so I walked down the block. You know, I had one that hit me in my shoulder and came out the center of my chest. I had one that went through this arm and came out that side. I had one that went in my shoulder, in my shoulder blade. It's still in my shoulder blade. Right. And I walked down the street. And when I walked down the street, I just kept on saying this got me and I'm not dying right now. And I just kept saying that over and over again. One apartment door open, two apartment door open. And at that moment, I realized, okay, I remember thinking about living in the Bronx and being in the 80s. And when something was happening, people would just look the other way. And so I just kept saying it till I saw more people come out because I was scared that somebody would change their mind.
Hearing gunshots and opening your door is not...
Yeah, you feel unsafe yourself.
Thing to do. Well,
yeah, people want to leave that alone. And so I just waited till I started seeing people walk towards me. And then that was the moment that I just fell to my knees and just fell straight down, my face right into the dirt. And because I knew that someone knew I was here. Someone saw me. Someone knew that I'm existing in this situation right now.
And to this day, you still have PTSD triggers and where you are experiencing that you are on your knees, face down in the dirt.
You know, when that young man got shot just not too long ago in my neighborhood, like up the block, I got after sitting in that restaurant for so many hours, and finally, you know, my partner, she got in a car, she swooped me up in a car, and they drove us home. And when they drove us home, as soon as the door closed behind me, I just fell to my knees and started like sobbing. And she held me a little bit, and then I sat up, and she wanted me to like lay down, just to rest. And every time my body wanted to lay down, I felt like I was back in that moment that I was putting my head back in the dirt from being shot. And I could not lay down. I couldn't even put my head down to the side. I had to sit up for the rest of the night. So that's what I mean. Like, I know logically,
You're not there.
I'm not there, but my whole being feels like that's where I'm at, you know? Again. So it's like living two worlds at one time. Wow. It's a trip. It's a trip, and knowing how to work with that and have a relationship with that existing. I would say, you know, for people that have PTSD, the most important thing is to understand how it functions in your body so that you can interrupt it or be with it or respond to it in a healthy way, as healthy as you can.
And that's about mental strength, I'm assuming. Is being able to kind of think yourself mentally out of where you think you are in that experience all over again, and remind yourself that, no, I'm in a safe space. I'm safe. I'm safe.
Yeah, I want to mention that there's a difference between, like the academic world right now is calling it, or the healing social work world right now is calling it post-traumatic growth. Okay. And then there's resilience. Resilience is what you're describing. I'm going through this crisis, but I'm going to have that willpower, that mindset. I can push through it. That doesn't mean that you're feeling what you're going through. It doesn't mean that you're cognizant and present. And that's what is necessary for true healing. Because if you're resilient and you just move through it, it's still living in your body. When you're present and you move through what's going on and you feel it, it's hard. But when you push through it, and you do healthy behaviors with it, and then you have new practice with it over a course of time, you get to reprogram your brain. So in neurology, it's called brain plasticity. So if you practice something long enough, your brain starts to reprogram itself, which then connects to all your senses, which then reprograms. So eventually I can get to a place that I don't feel it in my body all over again every time. But it means that I have to be in a health practice for myself.
Recognizing PTSD is not something that people wear across their chests. So I having first known you, I would not even thought that you struggle with PTSD. How can someone in the public, or someone who may have a close family, friends, you know, brother, sister, may be able to recognize someone that is struggling with PTSD and be of support to them?
The first thing that I say in all the work that I do, including with the human root and how we work with other people, is authentically get to know people. You know, understanding and knowing people on a surface level is probably the most dangerous things in our community, because if you're scared of your vulnerability, that means you're not connecting and you don't know what's going on truly with other individuals. That's the first thing. The second thing is, there are signs, there are things, but having authentic relationships is really important to even investigate those things so that you're not crossing boundaries or making people feel even more unsafe. You know, and then I think I've even lost some relationships because of it. You know, before this shooting, I'm a really engaged person in community with the people in my lives. I take their healing and their worth and their value so seriously. And since the shooting, I would say that I isolate myself more often. But because I'm highly functional, people can't tell. So it's like, oh, I'm not hearing from Anyanwu because she's out there doing some work somewhere, or she's busy, you know, and sometimes I might be still getting things done, but I've learned how to privately have my moments of bouts or have my moments of sadness or go through isolation and just being quiet. And those are moments that I've been impacted by my trauma. So isolation is a big indication of depression or PTSD or the combination of both.
Because I guess you can become depressed because of you suffering from
Absolutely.
PTSD,
I mean, I would say depression I mostly dealt with before the shooting. I would say that that's the reason why I wanted to live. That's the reason why I didn't want to die, is because, you know,
finding purpose.
I found the way to not be in depression, and it took me a long time. I started at a very young age working on it, and it took me so long. I'm like, yo, I just fully got to really be me without that, you know? And so I didn't want to die. I wanted to experience being a human being again in a way that I was living a free, liberated life in my body, as opposed to an oppressed and suppressed life in my body.
And here, someone coming to try to take that from you. Well, I'm very happy you're here.
Thank you.
You can live to tell this story.
Absolutely.
Much appreciated. We'll take a quick break. I'll be right back.
Mac Shack, New York. dedicated to providing a unique dining experience by offering classic, seasonal, and modern creative macaroni and cheese flavors. Find their locations at macshacknewyork.com. That's MACSHACKNY.com. Easy to Eat, an e-commerce solution specializing in digital marketing for the restaurant industry, offering a full suite of restaurant technology products, which range from online ordering, POS systems, web design, digital marketing, and social media campaigns.
Where you are right now in your life and your home, how grounded you are. Because going through all the things you've been through, you have to come to a place where you're grounded. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier about post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
Can you please give us more insight on that?
The first thing is the most important thing is to know that it takes time and it's a journey. It's not something that you just do. Resilience is I just get up and I'm good and I'm going to push through this, which is how I lived most of my life. The shooting also taught me that I had trauma from way before this happened and that I was experiencing PTSD from before this happened. Obviously, this is on another level. Post-traumatic growth is about really going through a process in which you learn about yourself, you process some self-awareness. That's even down to what sensations do you feel when something may happen. So if you feel a tingly feeling in your body, then you feel fear and you notice that for some reason you sleep for 10 hours right after that, and that's something that you do in your life on a regular basis, you might be getting triggered by something. And so it's really important for you to notice your behaviors, and if those behaviors have a cycle, or a repetitancy. And so for me, mine is like the stinging in my body. Mine is my breathing. Mine is my temperature. And then does that impact my cognitive processing? So even though I know I'm fine, if I'm in a real extreme version of being triggered, I will be terrified of even walking out of the house. So like even touching the doorknob to open the door and walk outside is like, you ever watch a scary movie as a kid and you remember that scary feeling and you don't even want to move because you're terrified? I get that feeling.
I avoid those movies.
Yes. I don't even watch those movies since I was a kid either. But I have that feeling about just walking outside because I may have been triggered by something. Or like how I told you, I didn't want to lay down. And so noticing that is really important. So I would say the first step for post-traumatic growth is to, one, notice. Now, a second stage is once you notice, what do you do when those are happening? Without fixing anything or working on anything, what do you do when the things are happening to you that you're now noticing? And now that you know what you do, are those behaviors healthy or unhealthy? So one, notice. How do you respond to what's happening? And when you respond, is it healthy or unhealthy? And the ones that are unhealthy, that's where the real work begins.
So it's first you have to become aware that you even have these symptoms. I guess they call symptoms, right?
Yeah. Yes. Symptoms.
These symptoms and putting yourself in a position where you can react to them in a way that is conducive to you being proactive.
Yes, about being proactive. But the reason why it's so important for me to say that it's a journey is because there is a fix-it culture that we're a part of. And we think that being proactive is having to act. Being proactive can also say, I'm not ready to act right now. That's the first thing. I don't want to do anything. I need to sleep. I can't go to work today. And knowing that you don't have to feel shameful about that, because that might be a decision about taking a better care of yourself. And then, because what happens is if you feel like you need to do those things and then you're ashamed of it, that's where the risk of depression comes in, because you want to hide because of that shame. And so if you can just accept yourself for whatever you are and however you are in that experience of trigger or trauma, that is probably your first step to liberation, because that shame is dangerous, And so if we're able to work and be like, no, it's okay that I don't go to work today, or it's okay that I need to take some rest. If you're okay with that, you'll probably sit in it a lot less longer. You might just need a day rather than a week.
How about reaching out for help? Because a lot of times we can't do it by ourselves. You cannot, I don't think, so.
Something I want to say about PTSD is that reaching out for help is probably the hardest and most scariest thing to do for people.
Why is that?
Because you also are in a state in where your psychosis is at stake. So there's a way that your brain is telling information to your body and you have no control over it. And I don't mean like you're crazy. I don't want to demonize it like that. I mean that you are cognitively like, man, I really want to go out today, but it's scary for me. Like, and knowing that that's okay for you. You know, and so that's why when I say that you might need some months, weeks, or days or years of just like, that's okay for me. And practicing that that's okay. So then after that term of time of accepting yourself, when you accept yourself, you give yourself the ability to get support, because then you're not scared of what people will think of you because you're okay with you. And I think that sometimes we're in this fix-it culture that we have to like figure out what's going on, but we're not actually figuring out what's really going on. We're acting out rather than paying attention and acting in.
I mean, this is being proactive, right? How about there's situations where someone may not have the strength to be proactive or the mental capacity or whatever you want to describe it to be, to kind of to recognize in themselves that something is wrong.
Yeah.
And does PTSD can it potentially lead to suicide?
Suicide is a huge part. And that's why this support piece that you talk about is so important. But I think that we're not meant to be alone. I don't think that it is natural for a human being to live life alone, to do things alone, to produce alone, or to create alone. I mean, down to the point that we set seeds to even birth children with another person. Like, it's not natural for us to do anything alone. We need village, we need community, we need connection. And so it is also the responsibility of the people that are around each other
to recognize
and see people that need support. And so, they haven't reached out or they didn't say anything. Okay, so then why aren't you reaching out then? Like, don't make it a power struggle. Yeah. Seek your people. And that's an indigenous way of being. It is not, there's no indigenous group of people on any continent of this world that sustained their people through isolation.
But in our community, it's very big in our community.
Because we were forced to. We were separated from birth through chattel slavery. And so because of that, we've internalized, I got to make it on my own because I ain't got nobody. That makes sense where your grandmother's grandmother was separated from her husband and her children. Like, it's a part of the fabric of our social internalization and generation. Yeah, exactly.
A more personal question. Have you personally been at one point in your life been suicidal?
Yeah, 16, man. I remember I used to play basketball, I was probably 15. And it actually, I've never told anybody ever in my life, but I've actually tried it twice. Wow. The first time I was in high school, and remember I said the years before the shooting, I had finally figured out how to relieve myself of this experience of depression. And during high school is when it hit really bad, because I woke up one day and I figured out it's not supposed to be like this. It's not supposed to be this hard. You're not supposed to be feeling this much pain. And why isn't anybody helping you? And I say that in an internalized way because my community was phenomenal, but the most internal parts of myself were so torn and harmed and hurt through so many experiences and instances throughout my childhood that, and then being around a community and church and family in ways that felt good, it was like it was hidden in the most deepest parts of myself and was never dealt with. And I remember I got out of basketball practice one day and the rain was coming down. It was pouring rain. And we had experienced some experiences of homelessness the years before that. And I just felt triggered by that rain because while we were homeless, I remember being 12 years old and walking 3 miles in the rain by myself and just really feeling like I didn't have what I needed. And that night when I was a kid coming from basketball practice, that experience, I didn't get the ride that I needed that night. I had to figure out my own way home. I didn't have the money to get home. And it just felt like I'm tired and I'm done. I'm done with this, and I had convinced myself that I wasn't valued enough to stick around. And I tried to take my own life. And I think that what happens is if you live in isolation about your existence way too long, I mean, I was around an abundance of people, So when I say isolation, I mean the use of my voice, telling my story, being truthful about how I feel and asking for help. That isolation can start feeding narratives in your head that you start to think and believe, truly, deeply believe that you don't have the value that you really have. And so I think that that's where the depression piece comes on. And when we talk about post-traumatic growth, it's about, what's powerful is like, I'm not a specialist. I've done the research to be able to stay here and stay healthy. But I'm also learning about it every day as I go along. And so like to get support, you have to be willing to be scared again. And I think that that's what really puts people in the rabbit hole of not liberating and freeing themselves, because you have to deal with more fear to get support when you're already scared. And that is hard to do in a society where we wear flashy clothes and we buy things to mask our reality. And so we live behind these masks and we get stuck. We get stuck. And I think that that's what I said. It's important for people to notice one another and say, I haven't heard from this person in a while.
Yeah, it's very... It's funny you actually mention that, because you haven't heard from this person in a while, because I remember I was in high school and actually one of my dear high school friends actually committed suicide this year, a few weeks ago. And I felt a sense of guilt at one point, because I felt as though I could have reached out more. Yeah. Because I know I haven't heard from her for a while. Yeah. And we invited her to one of our mutual friend's wedding, and she did not come to the wedding. Yeah. But I figure, maybe she's busy. Life, I got busy. Life got, life take the best of us sometimes. So I felt the sense of what else could I have done to save her? Could I have called her? Should I have gone visit her? I know she had moved. I know where she lived then. So, it took some time for me to process that and understand that maybe if her family who lives with her couldn't have done anything to save her, maybe there's nothing I could personally have done. Maybe there is, but however, I just don't know. So that's it. That was my close experience with suicide and wanting to do more, and feeling the sense that you could have done more.
One thing I want to say is that we always can do more, and I also think that it's always important for us to always know that we're enough. And it's so hard for both those things to exist at the same time, because we are a judgmental culture, and we judge ourselves and we judge our experiences. But first, no one can really save themselves but themselves. They have to want to be here. And I think that we should do things with one another in community that reminds people, man, we want you here, or there's value for you here, and do things for ourselves. So one of the things that I used to do to work myself out of depression is small little things. Every time I get paid at the beginning of the month, I'm going to take myself to dinner. Nobody else with me, and then I'm going to enjoy myself and eat something and have something that makes me feel good. Some things I'd mentioned with PTSD, baths are really good because it settles your nervous system. The way that the biology of the body exists and connects to our brains, if you take a nice warm bath and maybe boil some eucalyptus or some lavender, you can just boil it in a pot and strain out that water into a bath. And you sit in that bath, the essential oils that are in these plants get broken by the hot water and they go into the water. And that goes into your pores. And then your body takes in those essential oils, which are like healthy chemicals for the body, to let your body be at ease. And so baths are really good. Phone calls to people, connecting with people. When you feel like I don't want to go outside is the moment you should go outside. Even if it's just a walk around the block.
Yeah, just some fresh air from being out of the house in general. So, I mean, this is a lot to digest. Here's a preview of next week's episode.
To think someone is a criminal just because they've been shot is just another reflection of how our people have continuously been demonized. And it's the reason why when Trayvon Martin got killed, it was important for people to start wearing hoodies, because just because a black man wears a hoodie doesn't mean he's supposed to be feared. And so just because GSW is on my medical file doesn't mean I'm a criminal.